Rachel, it is just you and Kmart, isn't it, presenting?
Yes.
We'll go right at 4 o'clock. We got a few more. I'm sure we've got 64 attendees right now. So. Got 1 minute, just enough time for me to go get another beer.
All right, bring me a stout.
There's one advantage of doing it at home.
Mm-hmm. That's what Rachel said.
Hey, Joey. Hey, Troy.
Who let Troy in here?
I hope Jason Littleton knows that all this is a reformat of his presentation from 2015 at Partnering.
All right, guys. Well, it's 4 o'clock. I guess we will go ahead and get started with the last session in the technology track. We got about 79 people have logged into this presentation so far. My name is Brad Gregory. I'm with HMB Professional Engineers in Frankfort, and I'm the moderator for today. And our speakers are Rachel Catchings with the Transportation Research Center and Kevin Martin with the Transportation Cabinet. We discussed previously, I think you guys, if you've got questions, go ahead and post them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'm just going to try to keep up with those and dole those out to them at the end. But with that, I guess I'll just turn it over to Rachel and to Kmart. So have with it.
Thanks, Brad. I reckon if I had any respect, I should have put Kmart on the front slide, shouldn't I?
No respect.
About that.
No respect. No respect.
I wanted to make sure and list the group that worked on this research project that we're going to talk about. And that's Professors Hala Nasruddin and Gabe Dottie. And then y'all probably know Mr. Waddle as well. We at KTC also did a NCHRP synthesis on the same topic. And after talking to other states and surveying those, my impression was that Kentucky's in a good position to advance the use of digital design. Kentucky has a relationship with its industry partners that's better than other states that we interviewed. So, there are some things that we'll have to work on here, but all in all, I think we're in a good position. So the research findings are interesting and all, but not as interesting as what Mr. Ballinger mentioned yesterday about digital project delivery. And we'll try to leave a lot of time to talk about that at the end of this and what Kmart's getting ready to do in the cabinet towards that. So here's the basis of the research. We were asked to look into how the electronic engineering data and specifically the proposed digital terrain model could better support modern construction management. I guess before we go too far, I need to mention some things about vernacular that came up over and over as we did this research. You've heard terms like DTM, EED, model, BIM, and the labels that people use vary widely and they change. So we found out that construction thinks of different things when someone mentions the DTM than design does. It could be the existing ground or the proposed design. And then BIM, you've probably heard stands for Building Information Management. BIM for infrastructure is probably the most prevalent one you'll hear recently. And then there's SIM, which is Civil Integrated Management. And then digital delivery is widely used. Please, if you're talking about this kind of stuff, please don't refer to it as planless design or planless project delivery, because I think PennDOT found out that's kind of a public relations nightmare. It sounds like we don't know what we're doing. And the last thing this is planless. So in addition to a literature review, KTC did a survey, and then we interviewed, we did some case studies. We'll go through that and then the recommendations. We surveyed 125 KYTC construction and design staff. Got a lot of respondents, and I appreciate Jared helping us to get that survey sent out. The survey respondents were asked if they preferred to use DTMs or not, and then why. And they were allowed to submit open-ended responses. So remember, we surveyed design and construction. Here's some comments we got from people that said that they don't use DTMs. When someone says a DTM is not accurate enough, it can mean that they're not seeing the accuracy between the final PDF plan set and the model. Different things are meant that way. We know that En-ROADS has been capable of modeling to a high degree of accuracy for a while now, so that's not the issue. Here are some comments from those that do use the DTMs. There's some interesting ones in here. I don't know if, is this, maybe Brad or Kevin, is it really small for everyone to see? Do I need to kind of go into these more?
I can read it pretty well, and it's just a small part of my screen. So
okay.
Yeah, you're doing good. It's plenty legible.
So some of these that were particularly interesting to me is that one designer pointed out that they thought design intent was much easier to review using a model than paper plans. And then when training was mentioned, it was also said that it should be specifically geared towards regular inspection duties. And then also I should say, in case we have construction staff on here, there is training available through the CAD support section for that effort to survey on site. Here's a couple of my favorites. One person in design said, we start with a DTM, why not finish with one? And that really speaks to the loss of detail that happens when you go to a 2D PDF plan set from a model. And then, you know, one person said they didn't have the experience in the field or the equipment to be able to check the contractor's work. So a little bit of work there to be done. So as a part of this research, KTC interviewed 29 individuals from construction and design, and those came from KYTC and industry. So we had contractors, consultants. We provided a list of the comments, and then we tallied those according to how frequent they were made, you know, if there were similarities between the interviewees. We asked construction what process they followed when they first received the EED for a new project. Do they make their own surface files? And then we particularly wanted to know what specific elements that they looked for, what they could use. And we kept hearing the same thing from these construction interviewees. I'll say everyone was really open and honest. They showed us their processes and the things that they had problems with. Overall, they just want to see consistent and accurate break lines. Some of those people called them polylines. Like I said, the vernacular varies, but this is the most beneficial product from the design process at this time for these people. So Levi, you'll like this. Your dad designed this, this Elliott County project. And you can see the triangulation of the proposed surface. It doesn't cross the break lines, and I think that speaks to the value of those lines for the construction staff and in managing their project. When we talked to the designers, we asked them about their workflow in developing the 3D model. We asked if they had plans to implement a workflow for those that currently didn't. So in the interviews, we also heard a lot about the usefulness of KMZ files. A lot of mention of survey training and construction-specific support needs, training needed for designers who review the EED. On both sides of it, though, the contractors and the consultants and the cabinet staff, everyone was ready to start talking about this. And the consultants wanted to understand the expectations of the cabinet and specific requirements for their deliverables. So the next thing that we did was we looked at some specific projects. Huh?
Rachel, back up just a second. I wanted to mention something. You were talking about guidance there. Something that George and Terry mentioned in that last section is something that we've talked about, level of design or modeling guidance that they're working on. So that's something that Rachel pulled out of this research that was it was surprising to me a little bit, but it was really encouraging. People said, just tell us what you want. We'll do it. We just need a well-defined process. So that's one of the things that we hope to get out of this is kind of define where we want to go with this, so we're not wandering aimlessly.
We did talk to the interviewees about whether they thought a model should be different based on the type of project that they were doing. And we heard everything. There's a lot of varying opinions on that from those we talked to. But the level of development idea that you mentioned is a really good one. It's in the summary report. It could offer one solution to sort of the production hour dilemma of how you scope these projects really specifically. Say if you have a project that you don't need to do a model to a lot of real specific detail, then you scope that up front. You let the consultant know that up front, and you tell them their expectation is to develop the project to a level of development C or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that way they can fulfill their requirements.
Yep, just clear, concise communication through this whole process.
Mm-hmm. So I asked Matt Looney to give me a list of projects. I went through and filtered, tried to find recent ones. We didn't look at anything that was older than a 2014 construction letting, but remember, that doesn't necessarily mean that the design was started, very recently before that. So we found 12 projects that were of a larger yardage, so that we could see kind of how the modeling was in those. And we evaluated these based on 11 criteria in 2 groups, and 5 criteria had to do with the CAD standards that are required. And for this research, of course, ORD wasn't implemented yet, so we went to the Series 3 CAD standards. Based on the letting year, that should have applied to everything that was looked at for this. I think that's it for that, what I wanted to let you know. So for, like I said, the first group, we asked the question were the CAD standards met for the supplemental file folders?
This is my part.
Yep. I can keep talking.
You want to?
Sorry.
You'll be a lot nicer than I am.
I don't know. I'll probably interrupt you, so everybody just bear with us. I interrupt Cameron a lot, so.
Go for it. I'm used to it. Yeah, so like Rachel said, looking at version 3 of the CAD standards, which went all the way back to 2004, I think 2005, when I first came to Frankfurt, those were implemented, and not a lot has actually changed. There was a graphic standards group and an electronic deliverables group. So with the implementation, I think it was the XM software at the time, we started looking at what are these electronic deliverables, and we didn't call it EED, electronic engineering data. I actually stole that from Connecticut DOT recently. Elaine is a good friend of mine, and she had some really good documentation on that, so I actually took that recently. But the spirit of that has always been this data that we're getting out of our designs. We put it into the supplemental folder, but again, supplemental doesn't mean may or may not be needed. I mean, it's just meaning that it's not the contract document, but here's this additional information to use. So we're looking at things like alignments, proposed manuscripts, some of the very important file types for both CEI and AMG if the contractor's using a GPS controlled equipment. And then also just, does it look like it follows the general CAD standards? And you can look at that pretty easily. We don't run a standards checker or anything like that, but it's pretty simple to look at and tell how well it did. So this probably looks familiar to some people. It's a little bit of an older version, but every project that goes through the PS&E process will get this electronic file checklist. This one had the old yes or no radio buttons, but these are looking at the EED as we know it now, right? This is the data that comes out of our designs. And I think now we have 3 choices in a pull down, and it's submitted, required, and not required. And the spirit of that really is if there's something on there on the project, like a permit or something that doesn't apply to that specific type of project, not required. And then everything else is just to communicate, when is this going to be submitted? Is it submitted, or am I waiting on it? I'm going to get it to you so it can be included into the pre-bid documents eventually. Notice on this particular example, I think more than half of them are no, not going to include this data. And I mean, again, this is a requirement. It's not a optional submittal. I mean, this stuff has been required since what, 2004-ish.
This example didn't provide the coordinate control data either.
Yeah, I'm going to go off on that here in a second. Right. That one blew my mind. So here's an, oh, sorry. Do you someone say something else?
I said deep breaths.
Yeah, deep breaths. Let me get on this. Where's my bourbon? Damn it. No, so here's an example also. We're talking about file types, but we're also talking about logical naming. So for example, as you can see some file names here, it's kind of all over the board, and we require these things at a minimum to be some kind of logical naming convention. And with ORD, just looking ahead, it's going to be a lot more important than it is. And Chris James went over that this morning about the container file systems and all these references that we need to maintain. So it's going to get more critical. Here you can see it's just kind of all over the place. And it's okay maybe in some instances if it's fairly simple. But, you know, think about construction, inspection, the contractor trying to figure out what's what. They only have so much time to bid, so if they have to cipher through stuff and try to figure out what it is and they want to use it for their bid process, you know, that's just more time and more aggravation. They're probably not going to do it and resort back to kind of the old methods that we don't want. Think about people down the line, 10, 20 years, that need to pull this information back up and trying to figure out what everything is. So good logical naming is awesome. If we can get the minimum, and then of course you can go beyond the standards above and beyond if you want. But also I wanted to mention something that made my blood boil even more. I looked at one of these. I can't remember which one it was, but I looked at one of these DTMs, and I was looking at the features, trying to see how well it was modeled. And literally every feature, I'm not going to say what it said, but every proposed feature was a generic name and then a incremental number after it. So no edges of pavements, no right, left, Troy, good, bad, one. Sorry, Troy, I had to do that. Love you, buddy. But it was just I mean, completely incomprehensible if you were just trying to look through that list of stuff to see what was in there. So it's not just the naming conventions, but it's this logical approach is how is this going to be used downstream. I think sometimes we don't put a lot of emphasis into that.
It can't be easy for anyone internally to track a project between the teammates or the team members on the design either. Speaking from experience, I've had fun names like new, old, older, don't use this one, file name, stuff like that. So keeping it clean just helps everybody.
Yep, good communication. I mean, and sometimes us engineers and people in this field aren't great at communicating, but okay. So let's talk about some good stuff, right? There's some bad, but there's some really good. So this is a project where, again, went above and beyond for the pre-bid documents and supplemental. I mean, they went in and put all kinds of subfolders, detailed explanations of what these things are. So kudos to whoever this was. We're trying to keep it anonymous, but this is an excellent example of being well organized and putting some thought into some of this information that we really do want. Anything else, Rach?
Mm-mm.
So let's look at some of Rachel's graphs. So what do we say about this? Green good, red bad. Maybe kind of like Google traffic, green means you're, free flowing, hauling ass down the road, and red means you're cussing like a drunken sailor and trying to find another way to get home. So this one is actually pretty good. As you can see, almost half had all of the criteria for submittals of the different EED files. All of them actually had alignment files, so that's good. But then we get a little squirrely. One of the most, if not the most important thing here is your proposed corridor or proposed DTM in this case, where it was an older project. Only 2/3 even bothered to submit your proposed surface. So that's really disappointing. And then Amanda Desmond, where's my girl out here? Less than 2/3 of those surveyed provided the coordinate control data. Now, again, it's in the plans. We know that, but we really want these CSV files so that we can upload this data into the collectors, into your survey controllers. We don't want to have people typing stuff out of the plans and introducing chances for error. That makes no sense. And this is a simple export out of En-ROADS, and we're not getting it, apparently.
So I think another thing to mention here is that there seems to be some confusion about whether or not this is required information. So I don't know, you may have already mentioned it, Kmart, but this is from the CAD standards that have been in place. This is required when a consultant finishes a project or in-house design finishes. These are required to be submitted with the final design deliverables. Next slide.
Yeah, it's required. We want. So the next one, now we're looking at more of kind of the, this is a little bit more subjective. Okay, so we're talking about maybe the quality of the modeling approach. Was it consistent template drops? And if you don't take anything away from what I'm telling you today, this is the most important part, people. Transitions are the utmost importance. We're talking about super transitions, pavement widening, those things. We really need to make sure that those are captured, especially in the electronic data, because here's a horror story for people. Something that we have found out recently. Of course, I think everybody knows that when the contractors don't trust the data that we're providing, they digitize our cross sections. Those are the contract documents. So they're digitizing these 50 foot, 100 foot sections. Well, a lot of people revert back to the old archaic drafting crap where you put notes on there for transitions. I'm sorry, but that's not getting uploaded into the damn GPS on the equipment. Okay, they're taking the cross sections. What we found is a lot of these transition points, if you're not dropping critical sections, those are getting missed and it's screwing up in the field, and people are having to fix this later because they're not catching all of these transition points. So it's either critical sections, or again, put this stuff, if you have a really good model, we can put this stuff into the equipment and catch those without having to worry that there's some loss going on there. You have anything to add to that, Rachel?
No. Nope.
You all used some guidance from Utah, I think, on this evaluation. So it's not like you were just making this up. There's some industry standard guidance out there about what to look for. So we do want to mention that.
And that probably would be something else the cabinet would want to look at doing that, at the same time as coming up with a level of development.
Mm-hmm. And this will, and another, I just want to make sure, I got to say this. We've wanted to do stuff like this and provide guidance like this for years, and we're forbidden to. And so finally now we're able to actually go forward with, looking at how can we do best practices and put that in writing somewhere where we can provide some guidance. So we really do want to. So here's another. All right. So southbound is gridlock because that whole side's red. Yeah, this is not pretty. So when we're looking at some examples of how the modeling was approached, only 25% even made, at least 5 out of the 6 criteria. The last one here really turns my stomach, but almost half of these didn't even have some of the modeling practices criteria that we were looking for. Wasn't even applicable because it wasn't done. Files were not even submitted. And we'll look at some examples here in a minute, but this is really just, I don't know, Kevin's opinion here. Kmart says this is where people are just abandoning the models and not even really caring about what goes forward.
It's possible some of them did the modeling, but they
didn't turn it in.
Yeah, didn't get forwarded for the letting document.
And that happens sometimes because when we do make last minute changes, Patrick Stone had a great story in District 6. He had to change something last minute after the job had been submitted, and he didn't get a chance to update his model. And then the contractor came back and said they couldn't read the cross sections. They don't know how to build from plans. They need the data. So he had to give them updated data. So there's instances like that where we feel that kind of a request all the time to try to find the data that wasn't submitted. It's probably going to be there, like Rachel said. It's just that there's not a lot of emphasis put on it, even though it is a contract requirement of everybody.
I would not think that the cabinet would want the contractors to go back to the consultant after they received the award and get those pieces of information from the consultant. I would think the cabinet would want to have record of that. And
that happens, though.
Yeah,
it happens. All right, so let's look at some examples here. So first thing right off the bat, there's a heck of a lot of template drops here. Kind of looks like some of the metal I listen to, like Lamb of God or Gojira, and I got the double bass rolling through there. Maybe a little overkill, but and some inconsistencies there. But it is modeled. It's a tangent. It's not a complex template, but it looks fairly good. But notice the big deal up to the top there. We've got disturbed limits outside of right of way. Now, again, this maybe something happened and the model was abandoned on this particular case and it was fixed on the cross sections. We don't know. A really easy way. This is a great thing to do. If you're looking at your model, you've got your right of way features draped on your surface, so you can tell where your existing proposed right of way is. Whatever you control, rotate that sucker. Rotate it into an isometric view. Start looking at places where things don't look right. Model reviews, even if we're not doing them as a way of doing project reviews currently, just as a designer, it's a great way to check yourself, because it's such a, the visual acuity of something like this is off the charts because you can see these little imperfections. Here's another one. And this one, this one's kind of all over the place. You got blast beats going on over there on the left. You got kind of a little mellow interlude in the middle, and then you got some kind of hardcore breakdown or groove metal going on there on the end. So it's kind of like a Ginger song. And if you don't know who Ginger is, Ukrainian metal band, phenomenal musicians. And then Tatiana is like the best metal singer you'll ever hear. She's a beast. I recommend checking them out. They're all over the place. But we'll forget about the blast beats on the left, because I'm not really sure why you would have, what was that, Rachel? 0.02 foot template drops, 0.02 feet between template drops in your tangent. I don't know. But they did a pretty good job of here. You see kind of a transition, which may be a spiral into a curve. You start seeing some densification going through that curve. So that's good. Little bit of irregularity there. That could be just, where the super's transitioning or something like that. So that's great. But again, disturb limits outside of our right of way, and that's a little bit scary. So
everybody that's ever worked in construction knows that goes on. We've all had to grade to drain.
Grade to drain.
Yeah.
Wonderful note.
Warp it in. That's what Tony McGlone used to say.
Swarp it in. What part of Kentucky are you from? I thought you were with me. Swarp it.
Slide.
Yes, Alexa, that is overkill. Now let's look at one that makes me extremely happy. And remember the other ones that we looked at, they were kind of all over the place, and they were fairly simple projects that you're just pushing a uniform template. This one's much more complex. You've got what looks like an interchange, right? So you've got interchange ramps coming up. Looks like there's where the abutment for the bridge would be. The deck's not there, and the bridge components, but you can see they modeled the abutment slopes. Radii are modeled. Excuse me. Got curb and gutter, looks like ditching, and some of the drainage is modeled. The slopes look impeccable. I mean, this right here is top notch. I can't even get over it. This one's great. This one, you could probably build from, as long as it follows some kind of logical naming convention, and they could tell what these polylines or features were. So this is a great example of the detail that you could put into a model. And again, it's a complex situation that was modeled all the way through as part of the same CAD standards that we've been looking at so far. So you can see kind of the difference here. We're talking about the same criteria, but we're on different ends of the spectrum. Go ahead. Do you have something, Rachel?
No.
Okay. And then here's another example where you got a pretty sharp radius there, and maybe a little overkill, but again, they've modeled this fairly well. And then the drainage box. So this is an area where you want to make sure, like old Gary Poole used to say, roads are for cars, not water, right? So keep the water where it needs to be, and using your proposed model is a great way to tell, to look at what the drainage design's doing and make sure that, we're not ponding water. We're not, I know we have, allowable spread, but make sure it's not over tolerances. So this is a good example. And construction wise, laying out drainage, I'm sure for those guys to build it and to inspect it, if you have, 3D locates on that stuff, that's going to make it a lot easier on them. Now, this is an interesting one, too. So all the old farts out here, if you'll notice, the right-of-way line there is yellow. That changed in the early 2000s. So this is pretty old. The graphics, at least, are old. But check it out. They've got some pretty detailed contouring on the benches. Maybe a waste area up there. I think that is a waste area. So looks like there probably was some modeling done on this project. But the interesting thing is this is actually a 2D file. So that kind of defeats the purpose of having really good 3D design when we just get a two-dimensional file. That doesn't really do us any good. Rachel?
All right, so going back to this really good example that we gave you earlier that had a lot of good file folders and organization. The project had its first TC10 in 1991, and professional services gave me the information that this project kicked off to consultant design in 98.
I was still in college.
So anyway, and compare that with the idea that professional services had no record of a contract mod that dealt with updating a project for, a modernization of the CAD standards until this year. So you basically have people doing just like Kevin said, a wide spectrum of of modeling. So I made a graph. Here's what it shows you, that there's no pattern. There is no pattern when you look at the age of a project, how long it spends in design until it gets to letting. You've got over here on the left, there's one that's 19 years old, and it only met 18% of the criteria that we looked at. And then you've got another one over here to the right. The best one that we looked at was also 19 years old. So I don't know if Kevin wants to share, but he had a little conversation with one project manager recently about the EED supplemental folder requirements. And again, we just think that there's probably a lot of misunderstanding about what's required.
Yeah, just to make sure everybody knows that if you read the CAD standards policy, all projects are required to submit this, what we're calling now EED, but again, it was the supplemental information, the DTM, all that stuff. It is a contract deliverable. It is required, and unless there's a really good reason why it's not needed, that'd be a different story. But this is information that we need. I mean, our inspectors desperately need this stuff. Our contractors are asking for good models. So just since 2004-5-ish, this is a requirement.
So the research project made a lot of recommendations, and the cabinet's already looking at those. We grouped those into these categories. First one was to strengthen the quality of the EED, and we've been talking about that throughout this presentation. The standards are already there, just need to strengthen that quality of what is being received as a product of the design process. And then I guess another elephant in the room is just the professional services contracts will have to be addressed with regard to the modeling and with ORD, obviously.
Yep, shifting hours around, right? Just shifting.
Right. And then becoming, really clear about what is expected at the outset of a contract with the consultant. And then, of course, always staff training, staff support after things get underway. And then one of the recommendations was related to beginning that information exchange with industry. And that's not just the consultants, but the contractors. Everyone is ready to talk about this. So we need to talk. Everybody can learn from one another, and we move forward. I didn't go into a lot of recommendations on this presentation because we want to talk about what Kmart's getting ready to do.
Yeah, so exciting news, at least for me, because I've been trying to do this for 20 years. Well, first off, I want to back up. Something I didn't put on this slide. Great news. KTC has been given a 3-year contract to help us implement digital project delivery. So that's big news. I don't think this is possible, in my opinion, without Rachel helping me, because she's been with me through this whole ride through the Elliott County pilot back in 2010, 11, with Jason and Gormley and all them. So, I mean, this is a monumental task, and having her expertise and Waddle and then the KTC staff to help us out is invaluable. So I'm very happy to hear about that. A lot of people may not know this, but back, I don't know, a couple months ago, month-ish ago, I started a committee, and it was called something else at the time, but we've since rebranded this digital project delivery, because I think we're going to settle on that, because BIM confuses people. And SIM, and I saw SIM with 2 eyes the other day, so let's just go DPD, digital project delivery. We started out with this committee of design and construction folks internal to the cabinet, just kind of looking at what is our plan development process with ORD, which, as people know, OpenRose Designers, our new design software going forward, it is not built for plan production. And it's not really going to be built for plan production or updated for plan production, because the industry is really going in a different direction. So it's not really in their best interest to do that. So we're looking at what are we doing, wasting our time trying to maybe, I don't know, all the redundancy that we have, things that are no longer applicable, things we're just still doing because that's the way we've always done it, dating back to the pen and ink days or whatever it was called. That was before my time. I have no idea. But we looked at what other DOTs do in their plan sets, and we came up with some recommendations to kind of help bridge this gap from where we are today currently, moving into this digital direction, knowing that it's going to have to be kind of a slow crawl to, well, we thought it was going to be a slow crawl, and that changed pretty quickly thanks to Rachel and the group at KTC. But we were going to kind of baby step us into this transition and maybe streamline our plan production process. So we've got some recommendations. The cool thing about the committee findings, a lot of the recommendations, actually a vast majority of them, are low-hanging fruit. I mean, there's things that we can change pretty easily, and hopefully we can get time to do that after the partnering conference and start working some of those in. And that gets us set up then, hopefully, to be more efficient at our current process. And from this committee, we've already broken off a subcommittee for survey. Survey is very important for everything that we do. And especially going forward with the digital deliverable, we need to make sure that our pre-construction and construction survey is given the respect that it needs. And I wish we had an office dedicated to it here, but we're very understaffed with that. But we're going to pull in some industry experts, engage our consultants, contractors. We've got a contractor on board, so that's great. And I can see these subcommittees popping up throughout this entire digital delivery process because, and Rachel will attest to this, I took and actually it's Chesmeyer's old EDC 3D modeling matrix and kind of outlined what digital delivery looks like. Where is KYTC? Where do we need to be to move? And it's this big matrix, and it's daunting to look at what all is involved in this process. It touches so many different parts of the cabinet. I mean, there's not much it doesn't engage. So we're going to need a lot of people helping us out, and that includes, again, our industry partners, Federal Highways, contractors, consultants, our district staff, definitely. There's so many players out there. Other DOTs, I lean on them all the time for help on stuff. So we're kind of working through this together. Now, I mentioned that, and I'm sorry they're cutting grass. This is great, right when I'm talking. So I mentioned earlier that we kind of, thanks to Rachel and the research center's hard work here, we kind of got kicked off in a pretty dramatic way last week because we met with leadership, and James Ballinger, like you heard yesterday, he said, all right, let's pilot some projects. All right, so here we go. Boom, we're off. So the way we're going to do this, excuse me, we're looking at internal or consultants, does not matter. If you think you have a good candidate for a digital project or a project that maybe, I don't know, maybe certain parts of it we could do just to test things out. It doesn't have to be a full-fledged beginning to end digital. We do want those, but if you've got something that we could, maybe try some innovative stuff on, get with the project manager on that project, and then have them contact me. We'll talk about it and see, how this lines up. And then if it's a good candidate, we'll submit that up through the State Highway Engineer's Office because they want to make sure that there's some strategic planning on what we're doing here. And there's a lot of factors involved. So we need to make sure it's vetted correctly. So if you think you've got a good candidate, again, talk to your project manager and then get with me and let's have a discussion on this. And we can start that pretty much any time. And I've already been hit up for a few, so that's encouraging. So, but that's
your email in the chat box because I don't see it on this last slide. We're running out of time.
Because it's it's Kevin Martin at KY.gov. So yeah. Yeah. And so were there any questions? I haven't been paying attention to the questions. Have you seen anything or come through, Rachel, that we haven't talked about?
I'm just now reading Alexa's got a good one. Yeah.
Template drop intervals. I actually got that written already. That I need to release that. Partnering conferences hampered us from getting stuff done. Yes, that is critical, and we're hopefully going to get something out there.
I hoped that we could kind of open up everybody's mics and do some question answers. So.
Yeah, I'd love to have another hour of this, and we can just all sit here and talk to one another about it. But
just email me or Kevin.
Yeah.
Some people feel more comfortable going through the center and keeping their anonymity and.
Yep. And if you're interested in certain parts of this, we've got asset management, we've got, we'll have construction, utilities, stuff like that. Let me know. I mean, we're probably going to establish some of these committees, and we're looking to partner with whoever has a passion for this. And something I want to brag on, Rachel, real quick. No, you're not getting away with this, because I want to hear your face turn red. Is the research that Rachel did on this and the center. It's being used on I don't know if you're in the Utah session, but it's being used as a reference for what they're doing for model standards. And it's being used as a reference on a national digital delivery initiative from TRB. So not bad for your first one, Rach. Kudos to you. I couldn't have done it without you. And I feel absolutely lucky to get to work with you on this.
Thanks. If anybody has any questions or if you have any suggestions, I think you're hearing from Mr. Ballinger and Kevin now that this is the time. So definitely speak up, get in touch with everybody. Yep. And Mr. Bromley's on top of it too. So
yep.
Good stuff.
He knows if we can keep him off the beach, we'll be able to get some of that worked out.
And we just move our meetings to the beach, I think.
Well, remote work doesn't mean you have to be at home, right? All right. Any questions? We got about 5 minutes to go, and then we can wrap it up. There's a question in the Q&A. Hold on. Oh,
thank you, Mr. Sperry.
Were there any consequences for insufficient deliverables? They're supposed to be. Project managers and location engineers are supposed to mark that off of the consultant evaluations. If you're internal, then I guess a scolding. I don't know. But yeah, that was something that's supposed to have been checked and reviewed.
There's some suggestions in the report about who could maybe do that review at the cabinet, who would have that knowledge, expertise.
And there's all kinds of review. And just FYI, we've got meetings next week with Bentley on iTwin review and Synchro apps for with construction. Our construction folks are going to get involved in that. That's the field application for using the model data. And then we're gonna talk to whoever we need to talk to. That's every step of this process, because you're gonna, like somebody said, plan processing. Yeah, that's going to kind of change how they operate. Although they don't do engineering review necessarily, it's more bidability review nowadays. But we'll still have to address things like that and have them looking for, is this information included? Is it following standards? So, Aaron had a question. And that's something we're going to have to talk about, man, about the densification and template drops. I think we come up with the idea of a policy of what we want it to do, and then see if we can set it up properly or provide guidance for the designer to take that responsibility, how they want to do it. That'd be my approach to it. Robbie, has there been, man, this keeps jumping around. Has there been any communication with contractors in the area as to how they can use the models? We've talked to contractors, and I know you might be getting that from the Utah session. We're not sure what we're going to deliver at this point, how that's going to look. There's obviously that concern using the Bentley product, because I only know of one that ever did. But Rachel's been reaching out to them and Steve, so they're going to be instrumental in this, talking to them about what they're delivering, and we're bringing them to the table too. I mean, they're going to have input on this.
They don't use the Bentley stuff. I shouldn't say that. There's a couple that use the Bentley stuff, but they do want it typically in a different format, which is readily easy to export.
I mean, there's open source stuff. I mean, and TBC. I can imagine us setting up a TBC committee out of the survey stuff and really looking at how does TBC, the Trimble stuff, if they're using that in the field for construction and our inspection, well, you know, how can a designer look at it? Because we've tested it and it triangulates differently than the Bentley product. So you have to be careful about that. You know, there's things you could learn from looking at it from another perspective.
And Kevin touched on this earlier, but it's a really good point. The cabinet's looking at reconfiguring how the plans will be presented based on the ORD format. So this will be another thing that could become a deliverable after design. Could be, you know, certain files that are digestible by the contractors and the construction staff. So we just need to hear from everybody what they need, and then it's not that big a deal to get that done after the model is developed.
And I had a thought. Hold on. It was something that Rob had said that. I'm getting old. I forgot now. Oh, no. So speaking of the contractors, and other states do this for innovation, the CMGC bidding. We can't do that here, but apparently we are looking at other alternative methods of contracting that are similar. So there may be opportunities to where we could do some very preliminary work and then get a contractor involved to kind of help guide this process. So that's something that leadership is looking into right now.
I got a question from somebody else wanting to know if we were working with FHWA.
Jill is on this, yes. Jill Asher was assigned to be as part of this.
There are some of the national level staff that aren't there with FHWA.
Yeah, we're having a meeting with UNCAFER and the Resource Center to see if there's anything they can provide. And we're working with other DOTs. I mean, I've got a meeting next week or week after with Vern down in Florida to look at their next gen plans, and you know, whatever we want, we can do. We all kind of know each other, and we're all kind of in this together. So sit back, have a drink, and talk digital delivery. Well, that's kind of the time. I don't know. Hopefully we didn't miss anything. If we did, anybody has any other questions, hit us up, hit me, Rachel up. We'll try to answer it. We'd be happy to. So
you can access the published reports on that website there that the center has done, including this one. I think it's on there. If you want to see the rest of my graphs.
I wanted to use this so bad, and you took it from me, and I couldn't get it out. But your wibbly wobbly timey wimey graph. I wanted to get my Doctor Who reference in there. Damn it!
Thank you all for attending and giving us your time this afternoon. And
yep, hope we made it at least somewhat exciting, right? Rachel, be excited. Yay. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
I think they're all excited to be done listening.
Yep. Oh God, Jill was on here. I'm glad I didn't say anything bad about her. No, I wouldn't do that. I like Jill a lot. Did y'all know that Bart is a park ranger now?
Brad, did you have anything that you saw that we missed for questions?
Brad had a power outage, so he had to drop off.
Did he again? Okay.
Yep. Hit him at the office and hit him at home.
Well, all right. I don't have anything else from anybody texting me or emailing me questions that I see.
Yeah, I think Alexa says I'm too sarcastic. I'm sorry. I can't help it.
Just email us. Let us know what your thoughts are, and then, like Kmart said, he's looking for pilot projects and input from the industry and everyone. So, district folks, if you got ideas that you want to see implemented or suggestions, let us know.
Yep. Love to hear from you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
I think I can just end it right here.